Hey guys, welcome back to Freestyle Friday here on the channel. Today is all about annotation. What do you do when a teacher asks you to annotate a text? I found that sometimes kids, they don't have a skill set to pull from for that. So that's what we're gonna fix today. I'm gonna talk about what teachers are looking for when they ask you to annotate, and then I'm gonna model the process for you. So are you ready? Let's go. All right, let's talk about annotation, what it is, and how to do it. So, it's a big fancy word that basically just means slowing down and thinking about, really mentally interacting with the words that you read. So, when I give kids a story or a chapter of a book or even a poem in my class, I often want them to annotate as we go. And if it's a single sheet, they can just write right on it. If it's a book, obviously that's school property, they can't write on it. So, that's why I have the sticky notes on this handout. This handout here, though, shows the kids what I mean by annotate, and it can be a lot of different things. So I have this list right here of how to annotate, things to think about. So they can write in the margins. Let's say it's a sheet of paper. They can write right on the paper and circle, say they see a simile and they're like, that's kind of cool. And then there's a reason why the writer chose that simile, and you can dig into that later once you do analysis if you want to choose it. But let's say you just identify some kind of literary device that counts as annotation. Maybe there's a part that's confusing, or you want to ask the author a question, something bubbles up for you while you're reading. That's annotation, that question in the margin. Maybe it makes you think of something else from a popular film or another famous book you've read, or it reminds you of a song lyric. You can jot that down, like any allusions that you pick up to other works. That would be notable for annotation. What are you feeling about what you're reading? Do you think this is what the author wanted you to feel? And how? What are the mechanical tools that are happening that make you have that experience as you're reading the text? Why did the writer use a particular phrase? Maybe there's one word that you've noticed again and again. There's probably a reason it might be there, or at least it's fun to analyze it and think of what you might think that reason is. Do you agree or disagree with what a character just said? It's an interesting idea, but where do you stand on it? If you find a word you don't know, you can circle it and look it up in the dictionary. That counts as annotation. What are changing feelings that you're having about characters or things that happen in the story, kind of marking the shift as you're following that character's evolution? That can be annotation notes. If there's a question that you have, like something's missing, a hole in the plot, or you just wish you had, a circle back to, something in a scene where you're like, but what about the dog? In Great Gatsby, whatever happened to that puppy, right? I'm talking about, what about the puppy? So you could describe what's missing. You can use your inference skills. Is the author using a passage or a relationship to try to tell you something deeper that's happening, looking for symbolism, or really anything else that comes up for you while you're reading? That counts as annotation. So this worksheet that you're seeing right now, I actually designed for my students. I give them the first week of school early in the year, like I'm doing with you guys also. And then the idea is that we talk about it, and then they can cut along that green line that I just highlighted and use that slip as a bookmark. So I encourage you to do that as well. This sheet is actually free in my Teachers Pay Teacher store. It's a free download. You will need to sign up for a free account, but they won't spam you. It's all good. They won't sell your email. But that way you can download and have a PDF that you can either share with your own students if you're a teacher, or if you're a student, just clip it out and then put it in your book as a bookmark, and then think about those things when your teacher asks you to interact with a text. That's what we're talking about when we talk about annotation. Now, I want to show you how this looks in real life. So this is a famous poem from Shakespeare called Seven Ages of Man. I'm going to read it to you once, just all the way through. When analyzing, say, a short work like this poem, you're going to read it a couple times. You're going to read it first time just to get the gist, so that you know what the thing is about, like what's the main theme. And then on the second or third reading, you're going to dig deeper into it to look at like the structure of the poem, or what meaning that's like not there at first glance that might be a richer layer for you to dig into. All right, to get us started, I'm just going to read it to us. Here we go. Follow along if you'd be so kind. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his act being 7 ages. At first, the infant mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, and then the whining schoolboy with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail unwillingly to school. And then the lover, sighing like furnace with a woeful ballad made to his mistress's eyebrow. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths and bearded like the pard, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice in fair round belly, with good capon lined, with eyes severe and beard a formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances, and so he plays his part. The sixth age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side, his youthful hose well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big manly voice, turning again toward childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all, that ends this strange, eventful history, is second childishness and mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything. All right, I hope you enjoyed that. That is, again, The Seven Ages of Man by Shakespeare. Now I'm showing you what my annotated version of the poem would look like. So let's jump in and I'll talk about some of these comments. Your annotated copy might not have as many comments. I am an English teacher, for crying out loud. Like, I can't stop myself. But I think it might be interesting for you to see what a teacher is sort of looking for when they're looking over your annotations. So first up, the opening two lines, all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players, is a super famous line. And so I marked that. I'm like, oh, I've heard this before. This is a famous work. It must be important. Works are famous because they hold rich meaning that has stood the test of time. So if you hear echoes of something famous in something you're studying in class, there's probably a good reason why. They have their exits and their entrances. So then I'm connecting. So this whole thing is an extended metaphor. And so I'm connecting, the deaths and their births, with the stage actor doing his thing. I like that the stages are broken down very clearly into the seven. The first is the infant mewling and puking in the nurse's arms. I'm like, gross. I've been puked on by my own children. Nothing says parental love by being puked on by an infant. So that spoke to me. The whining schoolboy, like every little kid I know, I don't want to go to school. Creeping like snail, sighing like furnace, bearded like the pard, like the leopard, my footnotes say. So I just noticed that there are three stacked similes here. I don't know that it's significant, but if I were later going to do a literary analysis paper on this poem, maybe I could turn that into something. And then I also love this moment here where it's almost like Shakespeare's making fun of himself, right? Like, he obviously has written Romeo and Juliet, which is all about Romeo pining for the girl. And so he's sort of mocking that young love stage, which is funny because he spent so much time and so much of his success came from exploring that territory. We have alliteration here. And then I'm thinking more deeply about what is the author or the narrator of the poem really saying about soldiers and dying, in battle, like seeking that glory and reputation. It's almost like he's saying it's foolish that they're dying for foolish reasons. And so you could explore that as well. And then we get into the justice. He's a big, fat, smart guy. And then that justice is severe, a little heavy. I like this, full of wise saws and modern instances. That's kind of like me. I'm like, hey, always trying to find the meaning and then connect it to the relevancy of my students' lives with their modern things that are happening. The rhyme structure is interesting because I'm an English teacher. I pay attention to these things. This is not one of his classic sonnet structures. So I just noticed that, like, there's no notable rhyme scheme. Most lines are 10 syllables, but not all, so it has that iambic pentameter, but it's not perfect. Just like life itself is not perfect. We have more alliteration here. Interesting to note. And then the word strange is used a couple of times in the poem. So I might do something with that as well. Does he mean strange like we use it? Or does he mean curious, important, notable, foreign, bizarre? I was just sort of like, what could we do with that? The end, I like. There's repetition at the end, which completes the circle. It makes the work feel complete. But also the tone is important here. It's not mournful. It's more matter of fact, because that's kind of what life is, right? It's these stages. It is the cycle. And it's not like it's worth fighting it. It's just worth accepting it. So there's comfort for me in this poem. And so I might explore that idea. All right, this poem is actually not a free item, but I mean, you obviously can like look at my annotations for free. But I have more student questions that go along, kind of guide them through that exercise. And that's available at that link there as well. It's like, I want to say it's like $2. It's like not a big deal. But if you wanted to have this poem as maybe a launch pad into a study of Shakespeare or a launch pad into poetry, it's really good for that. It's definitely doable for the kids. All right, so that is your basic, short introduction into annotation. Don't fear it, just fall into it. Mark the things that jump out at you, and then I have that bookmark there if that helps you remember some of the things that we talked about. All right, congratulations, another Freestyle Friday is done. I'll see you guys on Monday for mechanics, usage, and grammar. Have a fantastic, glorious, beautiful weekend, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye, everyone.